Welcome to this episode of The Change Agent, where we dive into real-world challenges and strategies of leadership, management, technology, and so much more. Whether you're looking to grow professionally or to get ideas on how to improve your team and organization to get to the next level, we've got the insights, stories, and tips to get you on your way to achieving those goals, improving performance, and making sure that you and your organization stand out. So without further ado, let's get to it. Welcome to episode 14. As usual, I'm Eric, and today we are going to be talking about having a candid conversation about one of the more uncomfortable aspects of management, and that is managing toxic leadership. This is relative to all aspects of management, team building, and leadership. And sometimes you simply have an unsupportive manager or someone that's toxic, and you know the type. These are the people that are micromanaging you, they're manipulating you, and they may even cause you to question your sanity at the workplace. So who knows? But if you've been lucky enough to never have a toxic leader, then you should consider yourself lucky. But before we dive in, let's go ahead and get a start off with a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt. I think quotes are always very pertinent. I try to spread them through the podcast session so that we have a relevancy direction of which way we're going to go. But Eleanor Roosevelt said that no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. And the reason why that's really a big deal is because it highlights the idea and the concept and the truth that you have more power with your relationship with your manager than you think. If you're dealing with toxic bosses, I'm sure it feels like you don't have a whole lot of choice. But one of the things about this podcast today that I want to focus on is about that there is a way to take back control, and there is a way to manage that, and there's a way to exploit the strengths that you do have. So let's get into it. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the differences between a difficult boss and a toxic manager. They're not the same. Not every difficult boss is a toxic manager. Sometimes managers simply have really high expectations. They may be a perfectionist, or maybe they're really bad at communicating. But a toxic manager, though, that's a whole different story. I mean, you can have a boss who's going through a lot. Maybe they have a life event. Maybe they're having something that's stressing them out. Maybe they're having to deal with unrealistic timelines, and they're trying to fly top cover for you, but they're having to deal with a toxic manager themselves. So don't confuse toxic managers with a difficult boss, because that may be something that's a bit different. Okay. So what are the ways that you could tell the differences, right, between a toxic manager and a difficult boss? Well, toxic managers do have telltale signs. First, they're probably going to try to micromanage you in everything that you do. Remember, in past podcasts, I'd said that when you're moving from contributor to leader, you're not doing the doing part anymore, which is the contributor part. You're moving into leading, and that's a non-tangible thing, right? They may be gaslighting you too. They may twist out situations to make you feel like whatever the situation is that may be negative is your fault. And that's not something you are going to want to deal with. No one wants to deal with that. They also may describe or display favoritism and inconsistency in decision making. So often you may find that there's some new project that's getting assigned and you'd really like to be a part of that, or you might actually want to lead that project. And in fact, that particular project is given to someone else. It could be a favorite. Or they make decisions about a project that seem inconsistent. In one occasion, they may approve a report or do something for you, and then the next one they may not. And then when you call them on it, they show a lack of accountability. That's another sign. They don't want to be accountable for those things. If you call your manager out and tell them like it is, professionally, of course, they don't take accountability. They flip it back and try to mirror it to someone else. And instead of taking the responsibility for what they're supposed to be doing, they try to flip it. Or they do the worst of the things, which is public shaming people. I think instead of giving constructive feedback, they try to humiliate people in front of others. Agreed. This could be something that they do in the office or even behind closed doors with a witness, I would hope. But I think any leader, especially the ones in the military, we all know that those types of conversations are best done. The negative ones are best done with what we call a battle buddy, or a witness, just someone else in the room. And the public ones that we do are all positives. That's where we give out the awards and we give them kudos and we do all those good things. So yeah, toxic managers do take a real toll. They produce things like stress. They increase the rate of burnout. They disengage people. They create people to disengage from the group itself or from the project. And these things don't just affect your work. They impact all your health, your confidence, even your career trajectory. So, say in January of 2024, you were super psyched about the project, where it was going. And then 2025 rolls around and you realize that your manager has deflated you so much through toxicity that you don't care about it anymore. You're just going to do basically the minimum. And this is the impact that it really can have on an organization. You've probably heard that the worst thing that a manager can do is tolerate bad people. That's a paraphrase of the actual quote, but it's essentially the same thing. And there are things that you can do about this, right? You may not think that you have any control. You may not think that there are a whole lot of options out there for you, but there are. So let's talk about what a few of those may be. So first, you're going to want to step back and assess the situation, because as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, not every bad day or bad boss is someone that's toxic. But there are ways that you can find out. Now, if you find that there is a pattern of these types of characteristics, it is time to take action. So some of those actions might be setting boundaries. You may not be able to change the boundaries that you have or know exactly which ones you can set up, but there are ways you can protect yourself. The first one is to control what you can, right? And accept what you cannot. But what you need to do is go through and find out what part of this relationship can you control. You can control time. You can control your energy, how you feel about something, how you respond to something, and your mental well-being. You can also use emails and documentation to set clear expectations. And if you set those things in writing, there's a whole lot less room for manipulation. In the beginning, I think for my career, I spent a lot of time kind of taking people at their word. And almost every occasion that backfired. Now, I prefer to have things in writing. If I have something from a manager or from a teammate or from a outside organization where they're going to try to commit something or I want them to commit, I get it in writing. The other thing you can do is adapt the way you communicate. So you might notice how they prefer to communicate and mirror that style, because sometimes small tweaks can make a big difference. Now, this is not applicable if the individual is a yeller, right? And they just yell at you all the time and downplay you. You obviously don't mirror that communication, right? But if you find that you talk, that you're conversational, that you're trying to engage, and that you're the individual, the manager, or the individual you're working with is not, then maybe only speak less, right? There's plenty of leadership experience out there in the world that say we have one mouth and two ears, so we listen twice as much as we talk. So maybe we adapt our communication to be from a really good communicator to maybe just scale it down a little bit and only give them what they need to know, the bottom line up front. And that's helpful because in my perspective, I'm not saying to be less engaging, but to be more efficient at engaging. Many times someone who could be a struggling boss, someone who's just having a hard time, again, as I mentioned, they could be going through some type of timeline crunch. They could have someone on their back. They could be doing something else. And maybe they don't have a lot of time to read a dissertation in an email or listen to a dissertation on the phone, to a long sermon on the phone. What you could do then is just give them the bottom line up front saying, this is what I'd like. I appreciate your help, and then move on, right? Another option that you have to help protect yourself is finding allies and support. So you could go out and build relationships with people that you trust or foster those relationships. Because remember, there are powers and there's power in numbers, and so you want to seek mentorship from people that you respect, that you know are good leaders. They may be able to offer you a perspective or even advocate for you to that individual. Again, I would be cautious about people advocating. In my experience, it's just far and few between that people are going to go out on a limb for you and get nothing out of it. So what's next? I mean, you've done all these things. You've gone out and you've controlled things. You try to control your time, your energy, your responses, your well-being. You've developed some emails that you try to capture things in writing. You've adapted the way you communicate to make it more effective and more efficient, if that applied to you. You may keep emotions out of it. You may be trying to stick to the facts. Don't get emotional about anything. The common tactic, I think, for a lot of people nowadays is to write emails and let them sit. What I do actually in my email world on Outlook is I'll create an email and I have it set in the settings to delay the email sending by 1 minute or 2 minutes. And what that does is it allows me to write the email. I send it, and often as soon as I hit the button, like I've thought about everything I could think of, but for whatever reason, as soon as I hit that button, I think of something that I wanted to change. And by having that email delay in my Outlook settings, I can go into the drafts folder, stop it from sending, of course, by editing it, and then changing it to what I want, and then hitting send again, and then letting it get that reset on the timer. So what's next? We've done all these things. We've found allies. We've gotten our environment around us to help protect us by setting our boundaries. What are we going to do next? Well, I think if we've tried those things and they're not really working, regardless of what happens, these are the things you should probably do next. This would be escalate and document. I think in reality, you probably should be documenting from the beginning. And once you realize there's a problem or you have a toxic leader, you should have been documenting it to begin with. But you're going to want to keep a record of your concerning interactions, whether someone's sending you threatening or degrading emails, whether they're whether you're taking notes during meetings, anything that you can use, any kind of evidence that you can use to back up and escalate the situation, you're going to want to have that. Because trust me, if you go to anyone in human resources and tell them that you have or you filed a complaint in the ethics group or whatever vehicle you have in your workplace, you're not going to get far if you don't have evidence to show that. So if things get bad enough, of course, you could be getting HR involved, but let's be real about it. HR is really there to protect the company. They're not really there to protect you. So there are, again, limits into the amount of effort someone in the human resources department is going to really take to mitigate a situation that presents no threat necessarily to the company, and that this is social interaction, right? If they think that this is more social than workplace ethics, then they're going to be changing it. So the only way you can really convince them that it is a workplace issue and that it could create an issue for the company is by taking it in documentation. Next, you're going to want to have a kind of a professional development and exit strategy, right? If the environment is not improving, you're going to want to start looking for internal moves that you can have, because it's really important to understand that you're not forced to stay where you are. You're going to want to start looking for internal opportunities to help grow your skill set. Maybe get out of your comfort zone. Maybe you've been doing something for a long time and now it's something new that you kind of want to do. Who knows? You use it as an opportunity to get away from the toxic manager that you have and to move on to something new. But be careful. Grass is not always greener on the other side. If it's truly unbearable, you could just go the other route. It might be time to move on. No job anywhere is worth your mental health. If it's taking a toll on you mentally and it's impacting you, or even more, it's impacting you and your interaction with your family or the time that you have with your family, forget it. It's done. Like, money is really easy to get. I think Alexander Usyk, the Ukrainian super champion, said that money is easy to get. It's not that. It's doing the best job that he can all the time. That's what's most important. And you can't do that if you're having mental anguish. Next, you're going to want to turn that experience into growth. As painful as it is, learning how to manage toxic bosses or toxic managers are a lesson. You should learn about how those things look, how that individual's portraying themselves, what toxicity looks like, and then what you don't want to do as a leader. Okay, you can take that experience, use it to build in a workplace where people thrive. And all of this is inside the bubble of making yourself a great leader and improving your organization. So it's really important to recognize those things. And those are a few of the ideas that you could use to help protect yourself and build that boundary around you so that you can manage the toxic leader. I would think that the first thing you're going to want to try to do, though, is have a candid conversation with them like we are right now about their leadership style. You can say, listen, I'm sure you're probably trying to do the best you can, but these are the characteristics that I'm seeing, and I'm really curious as whether or not you intend for me to receive those messages the way I do. Did you intend to be a micromanager? Did you intend to be degrading? Did you intend for that to hurt my feelings? Ask them, because oftentimes when presented with a question like that right up front, they're going to realize something's wrong. And maybe they won't say it right there in the meeting with you, but they will take it with them. So dealing with a toxic manager is tough, but remember that you do have more power than you think. You can't always change them, but you can change how you respond. You can figure out how to protect yourself, and you can grow from that experience. And if you've dealt with one, I'd love to hear your story about how that went, what some insights were that you gained from it. So send me a message, and let's keep the conversation going. So that's it for this episode. If you did find it helpful, so please subscribe to the podcast and make sure that you leave a review and provide me some recommendations on how we can improve. I'm always trying to find ways to do it. This is the first series of podcasts that I've done, and it's really exciting to grow and to move forward, and I'm looking forward to the feedback. If you'd like more information on how you can engage with me directly, you can head over to kalinavision.com. That's KALYN as in Nancy, A-vision.com. You can also catch me on YouTube at Beyond the Glare to learn more and see how we can help you and your team move to the next level. Thanks for listening, and until next time.